I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail. That's bad. Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean I make medicine sick. I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Hi guys, welcome back. A couple years ago, I just graduated from university with my degree, and then I went into full-time bartending at a steakhouse. The people at this steakhouse were young, they were in their 20s, may have even gone to university themselves. As you know, with 20-something-year-olds, we like to have fun. So there'll be days we'd go out drinking after work, there would be parties, there would be nights out, you name it. And around this time, I actually picked up a really bad habit, which was smoking doobies. No being around the bush. And what this did was actually affect my mental health in such a bad way. I was developing symptoms of paranoia and bad depression. However, I managed to conquer this habit, but by just realizing of how destructive it was to me and my personal health. It's my routine for quite some time, and if I wasn't going out after work, I'd come home, have a doobie, eat junk food, and play, I think it was at the time, it was Battlefield 1. I was addicted to that game, all before the missus would be getting in from work. After a while, I would decrease my frequency with these things, and then I eventually cut it out almost totally. But that just begs the question, how do we pick up bad habits in the first place? Well, I'm glad you asked that. In the book, Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, he explains why certain behaviors get established and how they get broken. And this book looks through a lot of historical and scientific stories that pinpoint the origin around habit creation. Here's a couple ways you can eliminate bad habits that destroy your willpower. In the brain, there is a piece of tissue called the basal ganglia. It's alleged that the basal ganglia is critical to how we form habits routinely. Animals with injured basal ganglia aren't able to do simple tasks or operate normally. In rat experiments in particular, that part of the brain is trying its hardest, working intensely to try and find a reward. Once the rat has figured out how to get the reward, it becomes a lot easier for the rat to, bite into that slab of cheese. And this process is known as chunking. This is where you can group together certain amounts of information that take up less memory space. For instance, if you've ever learned how to drive, if you remember back to the early days when you weren't that great, you'd have to be paying attention to every detail, like finding the biting point, checking all your mirrors, making sure that your seat's in the right place, that there's no music playing. If you've got people in the back that are coming with you, everyone's quiet. And after a while, a lot of these steps and things that you take into consideration become automated. And the brain stops thinking about them individually because they're literally now impulse. And the habit structure which is implemented and described in the book is this, which is cue, routine, reward. Very simple. And when the habit is created, the brain actively stops involving itself in the decision-making process. It isn't working as hard and it can do other tasks far more easily. When I drive now, I have no issue selecting songs on my phone, talking to a friend, or even eating whilst driving on the wheel. And that's the thing, is that habits most of the time are created without your permission. This is like how this layout of supermarkets have junk food leading up to the aisles, just trying to tempt you in your brain. Or this could even be where your social media starts showing you products that you briefly looked and searched on Google. The point that is made consistently in this book is that habits are powerful. Creating good habits must start with defining the rewards. Now we're going to go back in time to the 1900s. Cloud C. Hopkins was in charge of stopping an epidemic in the United States. The thing is, he was a businessman that was like no other. He could probably sell ice to the Eskimos, that type of gift of the gab. He had that just salesman instinct. In America at the time, there was an epidemic with people brushing their teeth. and the health of people's teeth was in serious jeopardy. Cloud was in charge of selling one of the world's first toothpaste, which was Pepsodent. Long story short, he managed to make a massive success out of this product. The Pepsodent smile became a household trademark, with the likes of actor Shirley Temple even promoting it at times. Cloud identified something quite unique. He discovered that there was a film that goes over your teeth that is linked to tooth decay and can stop someone from having a genuinely healthy smile. Before Pepsodent existed, around 6% of the population had toothpaste in their cupboards, but after Pepsodent and their massive marketing and advertising spree, this went up to 65%, which is huge. However, it wasn't actually the initial clean teeth feeling that people crave when brushing their teeth. What it actually was the tingling sensation that the toothpaste caused in people's mouths, which was just a side effect of the toothpaste. And upon realizing this, most toothpaste manufacturers today try to make these toothpastes as tingly and sensational as possible in your mouth. This can be with different flavors, different types. You've probably seen the toothpaste aisles, there's so many of them. But this doesn't actually make your teeth any cleaner or be any healthier for your gums for the most part. But this established the habit of toothbrushing and toothpaste in households, which is where it originated. But this is how the origins of a habit can formulate. Cloud's message was, find a clear and obvious cue, then clearly define the rewards. The famous initial Febreze campaign was actually very similar in a way, but the product that makes houses and fabrics smell really nice wasn't an initial hit. But this is where the executives got their decision wrong in the initial stages of marketing. They were marketing it as a smell stopper. But it actually started selling when mums started spraying their clothes after cleaning the house. The cue was the cleaning, the routine was spraying the house with Febreze, and then the reward was a fresh smelling house. And when the product relaunched in 1998, within 2 months the product actually doubled in sales. And since then they've released so many different versions of this product, as you can imagine, springboarding off that initial success. I've even got myself a bottle of this as well. Yeah, blokes use this. You got a problem? But once the cue, the routine and the rewards has been established, where do we move from there? Well, I'm glad you asked that again. You're asking some really good questions today. This moves us on to Keystone Habits. In 1987, Paul O'Neill was tasked with a very simple mission. He was the new CEO of Alcoa, Aluminium Company of America. And this was an organization that specialized in the metal that makes Coca-Cola cans, among other popular products. But upon meeting the new investors upon his arrival as CEO, he actually gave a very controversial speech that turned a lot of people off. Instead of just taking the generic spiel about how he's going to increase profits and, yada, 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 he went on a bit of a kind of a crazy tangent that people weren't expecting. And this was that he was going to make Alcoa one of the safest companies in America. And upon hearing this, most of the investors that went to this conference went straight to the phones, ordering to sell all of their Alcoa stock immediately. But what a lot of people didn't know in foresight is that this is one of the worst decisions they could have ever made. And this is because in a couple years' time, Alcoa was showing record level breaking growth and profits. And this is all down to worker safety. O'Neill in the book mentions, I knew I had to transform Alcoa, but you can't order people to change. That's not how the brain works. So I decided I was going to start by focusing on one thing. If I could start disrupting the habits around one thing, it would spread throughout the entire company. And the way that he did this was by creating Keystone Habits. These are the most important habits you have in your life, and they can transform everything around you just by following these on a day-to-day basis. And the author of this book, Charles, understands this better than most. He gives a brief story about how Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer, would get ready on his days where he was performing in Beijing during the Olympics. In the Beijing Olympics, by 7 a.m. he's having a breakfast. By 8:30 he's beginning his lap of 800 meters of swimming, followed by 600 meters of kicking, 400 meters pulling a buoy between his legs, 200 meters of stroke drills, and a series of 25-meter sprints just to elevate his heart rate. And all of this was done before he'd even have a race to begin with. And all of these habits combined are what create something called small wins. And in the book, Duhigg states about this, once a small win has been accomplished, forces are set in motion that favor another small win. And I guess this is how the formation of discipline happens, because you know when you do things that you don't want to do, the things that you begrudgingly have to do every single day, the tedious stuff. But by consistently choosing to do those things, you'll actually wrap other habits and other positive actions around that. All in all, because you're engineering your brain to think that these habits are essential and therefore vital for you to have a good, productive life. And in a Pennsylvania study that's mentioned in the book, it talks about how students that showed some degree of willpower tended to get better grades and end up in better schools. And this is the thing, is that discipline will beat IQ and natural talent every single time. Discipline also factors into another part of habit creation with what I've just mentioned, willpower. Now, obviously, creating a good habit isn't as simple as going on a run every day or eating a healthy salad at lunch. There are laws involved with habit creation, and habits that conflict with willpower can be very fatal. In the early 2000s, there was an 86-year-old man who took a nasty knock on the head after he fell over. After forgetting conversations with his wife and having basic cognitive issues, he was admitted to Rhode Island Hospital. And before he was sent to Rhode Island Hospital, he was actually sent to the emergency room, where it was found that his brain had slammed to the inside of his skull. And this is what caused a subdural hematoma. And after this discovery, he was sent straight to Rhode Island Hospital. But Rhode Island Hospital at the time had a very toxic work culture. The lead surgeons would shout and undermine the nurses and the facility, which would lead them to not voice their concerns with the surgeons publicly. The surgeons would also bully and intimidate the nurses into not making many decisions. But when it came to the old man, there was a problem. The surgeon for this procedure was quite brash and arrogant. And what he did, without even looking at the consent form, which shows what part of the brain the hematoma is on, he went straight into surgery. And after an hour of surgery, it was actually found that they had been operating on the wrong side of this man's head. Yeah, that's a big mistake. And it took a further hour to correct this and sort everything out. But by 2 weeks later from the operation, the elderly gentleman had passed away. Something that could have been an easy case of saving a man's life was somehow made a lot more difficult. And I think the message in this book is that there is the collection of bad habits that affected willpower in the workplace, which is what led to the elderly gentleman's demise. And these habits being an unpleasant truce between the surgeons and the nurses. But we're going to lighten this up a little bit. In one of Scotland's busiest orthopaedic hospitals, researchers had a unique aim. And the aim of the researchers' experiment was to see if they could change the willpower of elderly patients that were just too stubborn to change. And the way that they did this, they gave the patients a booklet which they could write their goals and their weekly targets in. And it was found in the case that with elderly patients, when they had their loved ones visiting, the ones that wrote their goals down tended to walk twice as fast as those who didn't. And when the specific plans were written, like a patient meeting their loved one at the bus stop for a specific time, they tended to stick to those goals. The important thing is that they made their willpower a habit. They created cues, routines and rewards which made the pain and the discomfort of moving around with limited mobility all the more bearable. And what I really do admire about Charles Duhigg is that he takes like a less of a testosterone-filled approach to how habits are created, like James Clear with Atomic Habits. I'm gonna say Atomic Habits is a really good book as well. And what I do like about Charles Duhigg is that he's very humble. When he talks about when he was writing the book at first, he didn't actually have a lot of good habits, but by speaking to researchers and experts in their field, he was able to, I guess, like implement more into his life as he was writing the book, which is always like a nice little story as well. And there's a lot of bizarre stories in this book. And I guess life is quite unpredictable, so it's always good to have different perspectives in a book like this. Anyway guys, if you didn't know, my name is Chris. I make content like this weekly. And if you haven't already done it, like, comment and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care guys. Bye bye.